Welcome. I'm Patty Arroyo, and I'll be your host for this series of 5 episodes on sexual violence throughout the lifespan on ABC7 and Fox 6 over the next 5 weeks. We will be presenting this series in April in observance of Child Abuse Prevention Month and Sexual Assault Awareness Month. The purpose of this series is to give our viewing audience important information on how to help themselves, their children, families, and friends to identify, understand, and survive rape and sexual assault that affect many families on Guam. As this is a difficult subject to discuss, we'll do our best to present this material in a sensitive manner. Many children and families have been exposed to sexual violence, and the best way to work on solutions to the problem is to become better educated and begin an open communication in our community to help end sexual violence. Each episode will open with a short video, many of which have been locally produced, to illustrate the subject for each show. Our guest speaker for the episode will give us information about the topic, answer frequently asked questions, and provide a list of resources. The idea for this series came about when the Healing Hearts Crisis Center, Guam's Rape Crisis Center, presented to the Rotary Club of Guam about the serious problem of sexual assault here. In response to that presentation, the Rotary Club of Guam, along with other sponsors and under the direction of the Healing Hearts Crisis Center, decided to create a series of episodes to highlight the problem of sexual violence in our community. The Pacific Daily News published several stories indicating that Guam has 2 times the national average of sexual assault for a community this size. In the aftermath of a sexual assault, the survivors and their families often experience a major disruption in their lives, dealing with the police investigations, the medical examinations, and the process through the Office of the Attorney General with a possible trial. Even though advocates are part of the process to assist the victim through all these steps, this is emotionally draining to the victim and their families. This series of episodes will hopefully provide coping strategies to deal with these high-stress issues. Our speakers will also be addressing ways to help victims and families not only recover from this event, but also help the victim heal, as the mental and emotional scars are far more devastating than the physical scars. Let me tell you about the episode. This episode is on the overview of sexual assault on Guam. It will be presented by staff from the Healing Hearts Crisis Center, Marissa Uggan, a program manager, and Dr. Ellen Bez, who has been the medical consultant with the Healing Hearts Crisis Center for over 20 years. Episode 2 is on sexual assault in children, to be presented by Dr. Kirk Bellis. Episode 3 is on sexual assault in teens, to be presented by Dr. Juan Rapadas. Episode 4 is on sexual assault in adults, to be presented by Letitia Piper from Guam Legal Services Corporation. And the final episode 5 is on self-care and how to take better care of ourselves, especially in times of stress, to be presented by Dr. Pat Timinglow. Again, this episode will provide an overview of sexual assault, to be presented by Dr. Ellen Bez and Marissa Uggan from the Healing Hearts Crisis Center, Guam's only rape crisis center. This short video that was locally produced highlights some major issues in child sexual abuse.
Zach's dad called. Zach wants to invite you for a sleepover. Tom, don't you want to sleep over at Zach's?
I'm playing. I've just started a new level.
Come, it's getting late. You also need to eat before we go. Hello? Hi, how's it going? Yes, excellent. I just need 2 documents.
You think Zach's brother will be there?
Bye. Are you done with your game? Hi, honey. Are you on your way home? Oh, good. Listen, Tommy's acting strange again today, just like what we discussed yesterday. He's back to bedwetting, and he doesn't even want to go to Zach's. Okay, let's talk about it at home, okay? Bye-bye. Come on, Tom. The food's getting cold. Let's just eat, and we'll go to Zach's.
I'm not hungry. I have a stomachache. And I told you I don't want to go.
Huffa, Tommy, what's going on? You love going there.
Zach and I had a fight.
Ayade, you guys always make up at the end. Let's go. You'll still have a great time.
Zach's brother's gross. I don't want to go. Zach's house is gross.
Gross? Why? Look, I see you're upset and that you can't make it to the next level. Did something happen? You want to tell me what's going on?
Shut up. Don't tell her. He told you not to tell anyone. I don't mind if he comes over.
Esta, I'll invite him over. Alpha Day, Bob, this is Tom's mom again. Listen, Tom prefers if Zach came to sleep over at our house today. Is that okay? Yes, good. Hungan, no problem. Bye, see you. Okay, so I talked to his dad. Zach will be over in an hour. His brother's gonna drop him off.
No!
Huffa, Tommy? Did something happen to you over at Zach's house? You know you can tell me anything, Tommy.
I was playing with Zach and his brother on the computer, and I waited my turn. And then Zach's brother touched me.
Touched you? Where?
There. He always does that.
I'm very angry at him. What he did was wrong. It's good that you told me. It was probably so hard to keep it as a secret, Layu. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. It's not your fault. Dad and I will help you. Let's invite Zach over some other day, okay? We will be with you. Husen Guaizaha Layu.
When we return from our commercial break, we will hear from Marissa Uggan from the Healing Hearts Crisis Center. Marissa Uggan is the program manager for the Healing Hearts Crisis Center, Guam's only rape crisis center. She has 10 years of experience working with youth and victims of abuse. Marissa holds a master's degree in clinical psychology and is licensed as a professional counselor on Guam.
Thank you, Patty. Today, I'll be giving a brief overview of sexual violence to give you some information about a problem on our island that affects us all. Sexual violence is a broad term that encompasses such topics as sexual assault, child sexual abuse, intimate partner violence, and sexual harassment. As defined by the U.S. Department of Justice and revised in 2012, rape is the penetration, no matter how slight, of the vagina or anus with any body part or object, or oral penetration by a sex organ of another person without the consent of the victim. When we talk about consent, what we mean is the ability to make a decision about your actions. There are certain circumstances that make giving consent impossible. One is age. On Guam, the age of consent is 16 years old. Anyone under the age of 16 does not have a legal right to consent to sex, no exceptions. Even if the individual is 15 years old and in a relationship, it is still against the law. Consent may also be impossible if you have been drugged, threatened, or physically restrained. Here are a few facts about sexual violence that are important to note. Sexual violence is about power and control. It is not about passion or lack of impulse control or anything else like that. The majority of sexual violence survivors on Guam are minors. In fact, at Healing Hearts, about 80% of our clients are minors. 75% of sexual violence occurs in the victim's home. And this is especially true on Guam, where it is common to have extended families living together. The effects of sexual violence can be lifelong if the proper treatment isn't received. Studies have shown that on average, a sexual violence survivor will need 3 to 5 years of therapy to effectively deal with what has happened to them. Some effects of sexual violence are that survivors are 3 times more likely to suffer from depression, 6 times more likely to suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, 13 times more likely to abuse alcohol, 26 times more likely to abuse drugs, and 4 times more likely to contemplate suicide. Given these staggering statistics, it is very important to reach out and get help if you have ever been a victim of sexual violence. At the end of the show, we will give you the names and contact information for some resources that can help. Now that we know the long-term effects that sexual violence can have on an individual, the goal of our island community is to work together to prevent these atrocities from occurring. One prevention strategy that is currently being addressed is through legislation passed in 2011 called the Lani Kate Pertei I Famagonta Act, which creates a task force whose main goal is to make recommendations for preventing child sexual abuse on Guam. The task force, under the leadership of the Attorney General of Guam, has identified an evidence-based curriculum developed by the Sex Abuse Treatment Center in Hawaii that has been modified for use on Guam. This curriculum is broken down into 4 levels, appropriate for grades K to 2, 3 to 5, 6 to 8, and 9 to 12. Teachers, counselors, and nurses are being trained on this curriculum, and it is hopeful that it will be in all of our GDOE classrooms by the end of the year. In a broader sense, nationally, a prevention campaign that has gained momentum is engaging men and boys to prevent violence against women. Most prevention strategies target women and girls and focus on how to avoid sexual violence. This is considered risk reduction, not prevention. Getting to the roots of gender-based violence requires engaging men and boys, simply because most perpetrators are male. Prevention of sexual violence through these strategies include challenging cultural norms that reinforce sexual violence and sexist attitudes, teaching character education and role modeling to evolve the models of masculinity and manhood which reject violence and build respect, involving men in these efforts to set the example and take ownership that it is everyone's responsibility to end sexual violence. While it is a lot more common to treat victims and survivors of sexual violence, the cycle won't stop unless those perpetrating the violence also stop. While prevention can help stop the violence before it starts, currently the biggest hurdle that we have to deal with is underreporting. It is estimated that 60 to 80% of sexual violence is not reported to the police, and because of that, 98% of rapists will not spend a day in jail, leaving them free to continue to perpetrate. When nothing is done about sexual violence, victims can feel that it is their fault. The more time goes by, the more they may be afraid that they won't be believed if they speak up. Victims are afraid because oftentimes their perpetrator threatens to harm them or their loved ones. Oftentimes on Guam, the perpetrator is also the breadwinner, and a victim knows that if they report, their financial support will be cut off, they may end up homeless, and in essence, their family will be torn apart. Now I'd like to take some time to go over some of the statistics from the Healing Hearts Crisis Center, Guam's only rape crisis center. Minors make up the majority of our clients, as you can see, and in the past 6 years, minors have been between 73 and 86% of all of our cases. The overwhelming number of our clients are female, between 87 and 95%. Chamorros make up the vast majority of our clients at 60%, with no other ethnicity even coming close. Looking at the relationship between the victim and the perpetrator, it is very important to see that of the clients that accessed Healing Hearts services, 84% knew their perpetrator. 52% of victims identified their perpetrator as a family member. According to Guam's Family Violence Act, a family member includes current or former spouses, people living under the same roof, people who are dating or have dated, those related by blood or marriage, those who have a child in common, and the minors of all those just mentioned. With that high a number of perpetrators identified as family, it is of vital importance for families and our island community to work together to protect our most vulnerable population. When we come back from the break, Patty and Dr. Bez will address some frequently asked questions about what to do if you or someone you know has been a victim of sexual violence.
Dr. Bez is a board-certified internal medicine physician practicing women's health at the Marianas Physicians Group. She's the medical consultant for Healing Hearts Crisis Center, Guam's only rape crisis center, and has served in that capacity for 20 years. Dr. Bez has been a sexual assault forensic examiner for over 20 years. Dr. Bez was instrumental in establishing Guam's sexual assault response team in 2007. She is the founder and board president of the Guam Sexual Assault and Abuse Resource Center Association, whose mission is to provide technical assistance and education in the care of victims of sexual assault. Right now, Dr. Bez will answer some questions. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Bez. Here's the question number one. If I had too much to drink and I didn't resist, does that mean it isn't rape?
Thank you, Patty. It is rape. Why? Because when you've had too much to drink, or you are taking drugs, or if you have an intellectual disability, you are not able to make an informed decision. Your decision-making ability is compromised and your judgment is impaired, and that makes you unable to consent. And if there is no consent with sexual activity, then it is an assault. In terms of resisting, it is recommended that you do not resist your attacker, because rape is about power and control. The more you resist, the greater the danger of a more violent attack.
Number two, what do I do and where do I go if I have been raped?
If you have just been raped, then the most important first thing to do is to get to a safe place. And then, after that, the process most always begins with the Guam Police Department. GPD takes calls from victims at the scene if a recent assault, or at their home, or from the emergency room if the patient presents there. In cases of child sexual abuse, the call may come from a school or a family member or even a doctor's office. Police proceed to where the victim is. If it's at the scene of a recent crime, evidence will be collected and an attempt is made to secure the alleged suspect for questioning. An advocate is assigned to each victim, and they will give support and answer questions throughout the process. I would like to take a moment to thank the two advocate groups, VERO and the GPD Victim Advocates Unit, for their tireless efforts and dedication in responding to and helping victims day and night. When the victim is at the precinct, they will give a report of the assault, and then it is determined if a medical examination is necessary. If the assault occurred within the past 3 days, then the medical team will be activated. If the assault was more than 3 days earlier, then the important forensic evidence will likely be gone, and then the victim is seen during regular hours to receive services. The Healing Hearts medical examination includes an exam of the patient, collection of evidence, and treatment of injuries, and treatment for possible sexually transmitted infections, and emergency contraception is offered. Referrals are made for HIV testing and counseling. It is important to know that all the services at Healing Hearts are free. It is also important to stress that the victim is in control and can refuse all or any part of the examination or treatment. The advocate will make sure that they can go home or to a safe shelter. After the police investigates, a suspect may be charged. The case will then go to the Attorney General's office for further processing. As a note, in cases with minors, Child Protective Services is called, and for adults with disabilities or age greater than 60, Adult Protective Services is notified. And that completes the initial first responder procedure for sexual assault cases. There is one special circumstance to mention. For adults who do not want to make a report to the police, perhaps they are afraid if it's a domestic violence situation and they want to get themselves and their children to a safe place. Then there is a process where they can have an exam, collect evidence, and be treated without giving their name or the alleged perpetrator's name. And that process is called anonymous reporting. It is mandated by the Office of Violence Against Women and is required by law to do this. It is hoped that when the victim gets to a safe place, that they will file a formal case and identify themselves and the alleged attacker.
And question number 3, what do I do if I or someone I know suspects a child of being abused?
If you suspect that a child is being abused, you need to report this to either Guam Police Department or Child Protective Services. These agencies will respond and investigate. The identity of the caller remains confidential. And anyone who, in the course of their work, comes into contact with children are called mandated reporters. They are required by law to report a child's disclosure of abuse or if they are suspicious that the child is being abused. For example, mandated reporters are school staff and workers, daycare workers, doctors, nurses, and social workers. They can be arrested if they do not report a child's disclosure of abuse. In closing, I would like to say that the term victim has and will be used throughout this series, but victims can become survivors when they go through a process of healing. And all of us who work in this field are here to help victims become survivors. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much for answering those tough questions. When we return, we'll share a resource list that you can use as a reference. Welcome back. As promised, here is a list of resources where you can seek some help. Healing Hearts Crisis Center and Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center, 647-5351. After hours and weekends, call 647-8833. The Guam Police Department Victims Assistance Unit, 475-8620 or 472-8911. Child Protective Services, Department of Public Health and Social Services, 475-2653 or 2672. After hours and weekends, call GPD at 472-8911. Adult Protective Services, Department of Public Health and Social Services, 735-7384 through 6. After hours and weekends, call 632-8853. Victims Advocate Reaching Out. The hotline number is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 477-5552. Please tune in again right here to this station next week when our topic will be on sexual assault in children. Our guest speaker, Dr. Kirk Bellis, a well-known local child psychiatrist.